Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the King's Indian attack variation in the French defense. So the French defense is when we have the moves e4, e6, d3. D3? What is going on? What is this? This doesn't look like the French. Okay, so normally in the French, we would have d4, d5, and this is how most games will go. However, white does have a few second move alternatives. Thankfully, many of these alternatives are not very good. They are not very good choices for white, and black can often respond to them by playing like, black usually does in the French. So alternatives that black could play include pawn to d3, queen to e2, knight to f3, f4, c4, b3. Like, there is a lot of stuff. There's also e5, which is not very good. But like, there are quite a few choices here. But thankfully, they're not very good, and black can deal with them. And that's what we're going to be looking at this week, is we're going to be looking at a number of these potential move to sidelines. So for this particular game, I'm mainly going to be looking at pawn to d3 and also queen to e2, because pawn to d3 and queen to e2, they are kind of the same idea. They are kind of the same setup. And so anyway, let's say we were dealing with pawn to d3. Then here, the best move for black is still to play pawn to d5, basically threatening to take this pawn and then take white's queen, getting rid of white's ability to castle. We would have knight to d2. And basically, pawn to d3 already telegraphs a bit of information to black. If white plays pawn to d3, white is very likely going to be playing the King's Indian attack against the French. And the King's Indian attack is actually a very decent line. Like, it is one of the better move to sidelines, so that's why it's getting the introductory video spot. The King's Indian attack actually used to be a favorite line by Fischer. He used to play it against the French all the time, and he also played it against the Sicilian until he found the open Sicilian. So anyway, the next best move for black is to then play knight to f6. And now here, there's a bit of a move order trick that you can pay attention to if you want. And that is that the best move for white, if they want to go for the King's Indian attack setup, is to play g3. White could also play knight gf3, but white has to be careful because black has a little trick with bishop c5. This move would essentially mess up white's King's Indian attack formation. Like, it will force white to play either d4 or e5. Like, basically make some kind of concession here. Like, objectively, this is okay. Like, the engine actually kind of likes this for white, but the main issue is that it will kind of mess up white's plan a little and make white a little uncomfortable. Because now if white goes pawn to g3, then black takes. Like, it's important that black takes first so that white cannot play pawn to d4. If white takes back with the knight, then knight takes, pawn takes, and then queen takes queen, getting rid of white's ability to castle, and also probably getting rid of this pawn as well. The bishop would be ready to take it. So anyway, takes, and then suddenly knight to g4 comes in, hitting this pawn, and there is no nice way for white to defend this pawn. So white's formation would just be busted. So that is why, in my opinion, if white wants to play the King's Indian attack, then it's better to play pawn to g3 instead of knight gf3 first. So it's better to play this move first, because now if black tries this trick, bishop to c5, and then bishop to g2. Now, knight g4 is a terrible idea because, queen takes. And if knight comes to g4 after this knight goes to f3, then white can castle and defend the pawn that way with the rook. But anyway, that is not what happened, in the game. Although this entire move order is not what happened in the game. This game was actually a Sicilian, but shh. Anyway, a knight to f6, pawn to g3, best move order for white in my opinion. Pawn to c5. I've like the bishop c5 trick doesn't work, so might as well put the pawn there, just fight for control of the center. Play this kind of like an advanced variation. Bishop to g2. Knight to c6, just developing. Knight gf3. Bishop to e7. One thing I should probably mention really quick is that black does have a number of choices here. Like, for example, black could play bishop to d6. That has been played before. b6 is good. Bishop to e7 is the main move. Like, basically, black has a number of choices, but I'm mainly going to just be looking at the main one, which is bishop to e7. This is the one with the most games that you can study, and it's also a fine move. Black is just getting ready to castle. And now white castles and has the King's Indian attack formation. Like, this formation here is a formation that you can also play against the Sicilian defense and against the Qe2. So it's a decent opening for beginners and intermediate players, in my opinion, because it's something that you can use against multiple things, and you can focus more on how you're going to play the middle game, as opposed to having to worry about a whole bunch of opening theory and stuff. Like, it's not the most confrontational setup, but it does do fairly well against the French, and it's okay against the Sicilian. Against the Qe2, it's a little bit iffy. And against other setups, like against the Alekhine, the Petrov, the Scandinavian, it's like, don't play it against those. It just gets destroyed if your opponent knows what they're doing. Like, I actually have another video on this channel about this setup, like about how black can play against it, called Do Not Play the KIA Against the Alekhine or the Petrov. And you can actually use the moves in that game against, like, when playing the French as well. It's just you would be one tempo down because you would have to have spent an extra tempo moving the pawn to e5. But that is a decent choice. Like, you get some kind of interesting reverse Philidor position. But I'm trying to keep the French as pure as possible. Like, in this series, I'm trying to keep the games looking as much like a French defense as possible. So here, with this setup that black has, things are looking kind of like an advanced variation, except white has not yet played the pawn to e5. So anyway, next move for black is to play castles kingside. Like, another alternative for black is, of course, to play pawn to b6, bishop to b7, and then maybe castle queenside. But that's not what we're looking at today. And now here, in this particular game, white played queen to e2 on move 8. The engine considers this a bit of an inaccuracy, and we're going to see why queen e2 is inaccurate later on. It takes many moves to see. Like, that's how complicated this inaccuracy is. Like, normally white plays rook e1 and then queen e2, but that would still actually be inaccurate, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. Like, this is a very, very common inaccuracy that your opponents will make. Like, part of the idea of rook e1 and queen e2 is just to add support to the e-pawn, as it's going to get pushed to e5. But turns out that queen e2 is kind of a waste of time. Now, before continuing, I thought I should show two more move orders that can lead to this position. So the first move order is the much more relevant move order to the French, and that is e4, e6. White could play queen e2 on move 2 instead of playing d3. And here, black should not play d5, because if white plays e takes d5, black could play queen takes d5, but not take back with the pawn. And black ideally wants to be able to take back with the pawn so that the c8 bishop can get loose. So that's why it's important to pay attention to that pin and play bishop to e7. And after knight f3, now black can play d5. And then after d3, knight f6, g3, c5, bishop g2, knight c6, castle, castle, and then white could do a number of things here. here, but knight bd2, that's certainly a possibility. That's certainly something white could do. But this is not the move order of the game. It's just an important move order I thought I should cover, as basically d3 and queen e2 are very often the same opening. So the actual move order of the game was e4, c5. It was a Sicilian defense. Knight f3, e6, and e6 Sicilian. d3, knight c6, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castle, castle, knight bd2, d5, queen e2. So this is the actual move order that happened in the game. As you can see, the King's Indian attack can be played against the Sicilian as well. Like, it can also be played against d6 Sicilians. I think even knight c6 Sicilians it's fine against. But anyway, back to the game. Before continuing, I thought I should just introduce the players. So with the white pieces, we have WGM Elmira Berend, who is a WGM from Luxembourg, who also represented Kazakhstan in the past. And she has won the Luxembourg Chess Championship 3 times, as well as the World Senior Championship twice. Not only that, but she has also competed in team events, including the Olympiads. Not just the women's Olympiads, but the men's Olympiads as well, or the Open Olympiads, I should say, as women are allowed to compete in the Open Olympiads, like the men's Olympiads, whatever you want to call them. So I thought, oh, that's really cool. Really cool stuff. That's stuff I really like to see. Like strong players not just playing in their own league, but playing in the Open League as well. Anyway, and with the black pieces, we have Grandmaster Nana Dzagnidze, who is a Grandmaster from Georgia, and who was part of the gold medal winning team of the Women's Chess Olympiad in 2008. She also won the European Women's Individual Chess Championship as well, and has represented Georgia in the Women's Olympiads as well as other team events, like the European Team Chess Championship. And this particular game was played at the French Team Championship in 2013 in the top 12 women's section. And, well, actually, I'm a little bit unsure about the tournament. I was not able to find much information about it online. I am very disappointed in myself. Anyway, if you manage to find any information about this tournament, please do leave information in the comments. I will try to update the video description and the study. So anyway, more information about the players and the event can be found in the video description and also maybe the video comments. Anyway, back to the game. So anyway, the reason why Queen e2 is inaccurate is it turns out to be a waste of time. It turns out that this move is not really necessary. Like, Rook e1 is an okay move, since that does improve the square of the rook. And very often you see Rook e1 and Queen e2 played one after the other, and that is what happened in this game. So basically what's going to happen in this position is white is going to be trying to attack black on the king side. That happens very often. That's part of why it's called the King's Indian attack, because it often does involve an attack. And black will often counterattack on the queen side. So this is going to be feeling very much like an advanced variation, except in this particular case, black very often uses their pawns in their attack. Whereas normally in the advanced variation, you have the queen coming to b6 early, kind of getting in the way of the b pawn and, hindering white's development of the bishop over here. So that is the main difference between this and your typical advanced variation. So we see Rook e1. Now things are looking more normal with the rook and the queen. Like, it doesn't really matter which order white plays those moves. It's kind of the same result. makes the same difference. Pawn to e5, and here black plays knight d7, putting some pressure on this pawn. This is why white wants to defend this pawn, as black often does attack it. White now plays knight to f1, getting ready to reroute this knight. Black plays pawn to b4. White plays pawn to h4, getting ready to put this knight on g4. White is going to be going for their kingside attack. Black plays bishop to a6, and this is part of the reason why queen e2 was inaccurate, is because it ends up wasting some time. Like when you are launching an attack, it's important that you not waste tempi, like that you not waste moves. But I don't blame white for this inaccuracy. I think like this inaccuracy might not have even been known at the time that this game was played. Like it was not theory at the time. And many players that you face these days will still make it. So we have knight 1 h2, pawn to c4, d takes c4, now taking back with the bishop, opening up the c file, and gaining tempo on the queen. Queen has to waste time moving out of the way instead of making, a move that helps advance white's attack. We have rook to c8, making use of this open file. That's where rooks belong. Rooks belong on open files. We have knight g4, knight c5, just improving the positioning of this knight as it can't go back to f6. Like this pawn on e5 is pretty difficult to get rid of, even though there is no pawn defending it. It's still tricky to attack, as it is very well defended by white's other pieces. And now here, white played the move bishop to g5. And, this does look a little bit scary. But, black doesn't need to be afraid. And here, I'm not fully sure why this move is inaccurate. I think white's actually happy to trade this bishop for this bishop because white wants to get their knight to g5. Maybe put some pressure on black's pawns, try to provoke a pawn to come forward, create some weakness that white can make use of in order to attack. But black's like, nah, I'm not gonna trade. I don't really want to trade here. And white's like, okay, well then I'll do the trade. We have takes, knight g5, knight's coming in. Black keeps improving their pieces, keeps improving their plan to play on the queen side. And then here, white played queen d2. The engine wants white to instead try to do something about black's play on the queen side with pawn to a3. But that's not what happened in the game, and that would just kind of lead to a different situation. Like, black's still doing quite well, even if white did find pawn to a3. So black just plays pawn to h6, saying, get that silly knight out of here. Get that knight out of here. I don't like that knight sitting on g5. It's very suspicious. And white's like, okay, I'll get my knight out of there. Or, haha, I've provoked a pawn coming forward. And black's like, oh yeah, well my pawn's coming forward again. Get that other knight out of here. And white's like, oh no, both my pieces are getting kicked back. I'm gonna have to, spend more time, getting them back into this attack. That's not so good. Good, and let's see. In this position, black now played a very cool move. Just a very cool little positional idea. If you want, you can pause the video and try to find the move that black played. Like, there are probably many great moves that black can play here, but if you want, just try to pause the video, figure out how black should continue with their plan. I will reveal the move in 3, 2, 1. So in this position, black now played the move knight to e4, which is, just a very nice move. Like, in theory, white could trade their bishop for this knight, but that's generally not a good idea because that will create some very serious light square weaknesses around white's king. And it doesn't even really win a pawn for white. Like, if white takes like this, then we have a discovered attack on the queen. And if queen goes to f4, for example, in order to defend the e5 pawn, which is hit by the knight, we could have the knight coming in to d4. Just a strong little knight. And white does not have time to take this pawn. White has to do something about this nasty knight coming over here and also threatening this pawn as well. So, you know, we could have this, and, you know, black doesn't even need to take this pawn. Black could be like, nah, it's okay. I'll just use those light squares around your king. And then, you know, black would be like, you know, an exchange is nice, but why not just go for peace activity? You know, why not? And black would just have a completely crushing position here. Here, black doesn't even need to go for the fork and win the exchange. It's like, nah. But anyway, that's not what happened in the game. Like, white is strong enough to know not to trade this bishop for a knight. This bishop is a very important defensive resource in the King's Indian attack. It's part of what helps you from not getting destroyed by an opponent's attack on the king side. So instead, white just moved their queen to d1, hitting this pawn on h5, you know, very sensible move. Black plays pawn to g6, just defending that pawn. And here white plays bishop to f3, potentially sacrificing this bishop for the pawns. Like, this would weaken, you know, white's king side, but if white's attack is strong enough, then black's going to be too distracted dealing with that in order to actually attack white. But, you know, black's not too worried about that. Black just is like, okay, I'll just grab this pawn on e5. I'll get rid of some of your control of the center. You know, I'll get rid of this annoying pawn that was a thorn in my side that was basically restricting the movement of my knight and my queen, all that kind of stuff. So white goes for this little sacrifice. Black takes back. White takes. And now black's like, okay, you're trying to attack me. I'm just going to bring my queen to f6 to help defend against, you know, any of this nastiness that you're doing here. So white now plays pawn to f3. And basically, this would force this knight away so that white can take the knight on e5. So the sacrifice of the bishop, it was more of a trade. And in this case, it was a trade that opens up black's king a little, so it is a bit more justified than, say, trading on e4. And black's like, I don't need to react to this threat over here. You can take my knight. I don't mind. I'll just take this pawn over here. I'll just improve my pieces. And then white took back. Black took back like this, and black is getting ready to double up and getting ready to just storm in and attack white's king. So, sadly, white's attack was not strong enough, was not scary enough for black to deal with, whereas black's plan, you know, of playing on the queen side, as well as in the center in this case, is working very well. So now white has to deal with this. So white played rook e d1, just stopping this rook from coming to d2. We have rook takes with check, queen takes, and now a very nice move, bishop to d3, just putting the bishop on a very active square while at the same time defending this pawn. And here, white now played the move knight to f4. And if you want, you can again pause the video and try to find the winning idea for black in this position. Like, there are probably multiple good moves for black, but there's one idea that I just think is very nice. It's just a very, very simple idea that is really hard to deal with. So I will reveal the move in 3, 2, 1. And so the idea is just queen to g7, just attack the pawn on g3, and there is no nice way to defend this pawn. Like, basically, in this position, if white tries defending this pawn with a move like queen e1, for example, then that just hangs, you know, a knight. That's just a free knight, because if white takes, whoops, you know, that's not good. So queen e1 does not work for defending this pawn. And knight h5 could be tried, just defending the pawn with this knight. Right, but then, just queen g6, and then, how is white going to deal with these problems here? How is white going to deal with just the rook coming here, and, blocking the defense of this knight, all that kind of stuff. Or maybe even bishop coming here. Actually, no, bishop's terrible, you just hang your rook. Like, there isn't really any nice way of dealing with this problem. Like, I suppose I should probably consider this line. And king h1, knight f4, that kind of stuff. Suppose white could try this. But you probably noticed the engine evaluation is very nasty. Oh yeah, it looks like I had the wrong idea. It wasn't blocking with that. It was actually just pushing this pawn. Just push the pawn, and then now the pawn comes up and the knight's going to drop. I see. That's what it is. Okay. Anyway, that's not what happened in the game. Instead, white played king h1 right away. Didn't try to save this pawn because there really isn't any nice way of saving the pawn. And black just took it, and here white resigned. Like, I think in theory, there was some really cool, crazy, convoluted tactic that involves sacking the rook for this knight and some crazy mating net and stuff. But in my opinion, what black did in this game was perfect. Like, in my opinion, resigns in 1 is much better than mate in 6. Much better than any flashy, convoluted, flashy, convoluted combination. In my opinion, like, especially when you're playing it in a game where there might be money on the line, or you're playing in a team event where, there might be, other players who are depending on the result of your game. In my opinion, just choosing these very practical ways of winning that just cause your opponent to lose all hope and resign immediately. Those are the best ways to go. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, and bye for now.